Hey guys, so I've finally done it. I've finally built a destroyer that's cheap. Well, cheap is a relative term. When you start the game, you start out with zero resources, but you start out with this big floating fortress that's relatively worthless. So the first thing most people do is scrap it, and you usually end up with around 17,000 natural resources, which is basically just wood, and 14,000 metal resources. And I don't know exactly how much you end up with the rest of this. I think crystal you only end up with like 150. So I'm gonna have to grow a little crystal before I can build one of these destroyers. But basically, this destroyer is so cheap I can almost spawn it in the very beginning of the game, which is absolutely fantastic because within like 20 minutes of starting the game, you're probably gonna end up under attack by something. Granted, the thing you're under attack by is probably gonna be so weak you don't actually need a good ship, but I would rather have one very good ship that will actually continue to be usable and useful into the distant future than just some crappy half-ass constructed just to destroy whatever weak ship they end up throwing at me in the beginning. So that's exactly what this is. This destroyer is just a little over 90,000 resource points, which I'm going to constantly flub that every time I try and say it because RP in War Thunder is research points. In this game, they're resource points, and resource and research are very similar. I'm going to be screwing that up constantly this entire game, but it's 91,000 resource points, which is quite cheap. And the design philosophy behind it is completely backwards from every ship I've ever designed. But the most important thing about it is it looks like a fox. Excuse me. Oh my god, I'm still so sick at the moment. But look at it. It looks like a fox. It really does. Well, it looks like a fox from the side. From some very specific angles from the side, right about here, it does start to really look like a fox. With those blue fin eyes. I'll look at my fox's finish. Just accept this as the fact that it is. Look at it. Oh, but then from the front, it no longer looks like a fox, does it? Yeah, she put on some weight. This is what Fox is going to look like after she immigrates to America. So, those of you that know what foxes look like, they actually are really cool looking animals. They have a really cool color scheme. Where they're, well, not all of them, but the generic red foxes that most people think of when you think of foxes. And if you Google image search fox, that's probably the majority of what's going to pop up. They are mostly red. They do have white down their chest and sometimes halfway down their belly, and they do have like the lower half of their face and sometimes even towards the upper half of their face ends up being white as well. And then they have the black marks on the front of their legs. It looks really cool. Unfortunately, this isn't actually a fox, it's actually a ship. And ships don't actually have chests, so I just made the front half of the bow white and then give her a white stripe down her belly. And they ships don't have legs, so I ended up just making her sides black instead. But overall, overall, I am fairly happy with how this turned out. Look at it, it's a fox. So I just have it called Fox Destroyer right now because I'm lazy. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to be calling this my Fox Class Destroyer, and I'm going to be colloquially referring to them as my Fox Swarm, because there is going to be a Foxy Swarm. They are cheap enough that even relatively early in the game, I'm expecting to have, by the time I start doing like serious offenses, I'm expecting to have at least 3 of these. With that said, as I said, this design is completely different than pretty much anything I've ever made before. And I'm going to try and keep this video relatively short so it doesn't take me 11 hours to upload. So it does have some hydroplanes down here. Those little things right there are hydroplanes, which means when the ship gets moving up to speed, those do lift its nose pretty decent height out of the water, and it will eventually stabilize. It's not stable at the moment, but as I said, it will eventually stabilize. And she ends up running along with the nose out of the water. Which means, yes, if she ever comes to a stop, her nose goes underwater and she drowns. But she's an aquatic fox. They don't. Look at it! It looks so silly. Ah, it's a fox. Anyway, what I'm saying about how this completely goes against my usual design philosophy. I'm gonna turn the AI off just to have it stop. By what I mean completely against my normal design philosophy, will that bring in the Volpo, because the Volpo actually is a fantastic example of my usual design philosophy. Extremely thick steel all down the sides, and it's a very heavy ship, which means it sits very deep in the water, which also means it takes a shitload of power and a lot of... Well, basically, I mean, looking at these two ships, which do you think is going to be easier to actually hit? And note that when the shells hit the water, there's like a 50% chance that they're going to skip off the water and back up into the air. So actually shooting the ship below the waterline is very difficult to do. Although absolutely possible, but it's still difficult to do. And the fact that the Volpo does have 3 layers of steel along most of its hull, at least the important parts, does make it extremely difficult to punch through. In very sharp contrast, to keep my Fox class ship cheap, I wanted it to be fast. I managed to make the Volpo almost 20 meters per second by putting a shitload of massive, powerful engines in it. I can't afford to do that with the Fox, so because again, it's very cheap, very light destroyer. So I've had to compromise my normal design philosophy. Instead of having the ship sit very deep in the water, exposing only a relatively small amount of the ship to fire, instead I've had to make the ship use the hydroplanes to get its nose most of the way out of the water to get up to that 20 meter per second speed with its much weaker engine. I also had to cut down on the armor to make it light enough to make this possible, which means there's only a single layer of steel, most of which is the half, it counts as half a block because it's sloped. So I only have this one layer of steel, and that's absolutely it. This upper deck is literally just wood. Literally just wood. There's nothing but wood. The good news is that the side of the hull does have 2 layers of woven wood. Does it have 2 layers? Yeah, it has 2. So it has 2 layers of wood. One with the beams going vertically, the other with them going horizontally, and then we have the horizontal steel beams on the outside. So it's a decent amount of armor. Then we have the internals. I haven't armored the AI core at all. Basically, the ship as it stands right now is in its cheapest trim. This is supposed to be the ship that I end up spawning in very early in the game, which means I'm not going to be being shot at by any large area of effect explosives. Once I start going up against more dangerous ships later in the game, I'm going to have to add some extra armoring to armor the AI core and armor the turret bases a little better. I'm going to leave the engines relatively exposed because getting the engines shot out isn't exactly a death sentence. The ship's ammo rack is up here. It's only 1 layer, I believe, of... Yeah, it's only just 1 layer of ammo, so it doesn't have that much ammunition. But the 2 turrets it uses don't use that much ammo either because they can't, because the turrets have to stay pretty cheap as well. It only has 2 weapons. It has this triple-barreled 80mm, very high, well, almost 500 meters per second. That's a pretty solid velocity AP round. I'm using armor-piercing rounds, so if the ammo rack on the turret gets exploded, it doesn't rip apart the entire ship. I'm getting my high explosive out using this cram cannon, which is a fantastic little weapon that fires an obscenely powerful explosive shell. And I have it fused so it will detonate about 5 meters, or it will detonate about 8 meters inside the ship if it can get through the outer armor. And it has plenty of armor piercing, so it should be able to do that reasonably reliably. So it's a very low rate of fire, relatively short range, relatively low velocity. Well, not even relatively, it's a very low velocity round. I think it's just over 100 meters per second. It's I don't remember where the speed, it's 126 meters per second. So, and those are the only 2 weapons. In sharp contrast, the Volpo has the backup little crap turret on the front. The Volpo needs some serious work. First off, I think I'm going to move this main turret forwards a little more and have it be the forward mounted turret. The buzzkill is probably going to be mounted like on a tower in the center. I do this, the fact that I have these little weapons in front of the big weapons, it means when the ship is closing in, it can only fire the little shit front turret, which I don't even need. I don't need that turret. It's a really bad turret. But yeah, the Volpo does need some work before I end up actually using it, but it's not a lot of work. It's pretty much done, and I do need to paint it. But the Fox is done, so this is my first ship that is completely finished. And once I finish up tidying up the Volpo a bit, And then I want to build a small, lightweight air superiority fighter and maybe give it some basic ground attack ability. And then I'm going to start the campaign. And the reason I want to do that is because the Vulpo is too expensive to spawn in anywhere near the beginning of the game. It costs a lot. It's a very expensive ship at over 300,000 resource points. That's not something I'm going to be able to afford relatively early. So I'm not going to be able to get a Vulpo together that early. And the Vulpo itself does not even have that good of anti-air abilities. The Buzzkill turret I borrowed from Ireland Gaming is reasonably good at killing basically everything except flying squirrels. And these missiles can be modified relatively easily to kill anything, including flying squirrels. But still, I'd rather not depend on the ridiculously expensive Vulpos for air superiority. So I am going to be building a dedicated fighter for that purpose. But after I get that, these three ships, well, these two ships and that fighter are going to be my only starting vessels. And I'll design new vessels as new situations arise and update these as new situations arise in the actual campaign, which is going to be fun. Yay. So basically I'm saying expect one, maybe two more videos. One video showing off the fighter, and then one video showing off an updated Vulpo. If I do end up updating it enough to warrant a new video, which I don't think I do because that last one was ridiculously long. So we're going to destroy all vehicles, and we're going to spawn in another Fox. And I'm going to demonstrate just how good the Fox is. This ship was designed from the ground up to destroy early ships, meaning like the Vanguard retrofits, Rival Homes, and Sea Vipers and stuff like that. The four ships that I just spawned in, this is what the Vulpo, this is what the Fox is designed to fight. And so we're going to see a 4-on-1. The total cost of this fleet is at least 3, if not 5 times more expensive than this single Fox. And we're going to see just how well it does. So again, these very early, very easy ships are what this ship is designed to fight. So it makes sense that we would test against them. I don't think that shell's going to hit. It's not the most accurate cannon in the world. Oh, we shot its sail off already. So the two weapons that the Fox does have are pretty effective. This 80mm triple-barreled gun, I'm going to start using it on... I think I might actually put one of these on the Vulpo because it's such a good cannon and it's so cheap. It has plenty of armor piercing, so this AP cannon can stay effective against very late-game ships. While at the same time, it's not terribly effective against the early ships that we're fighting right now, but I don't need to be terribly effective against these ships because they're so bad anyway. I'm going to have so much time to slowly rip them apart, it doesn't matter. That massive main cannon of the Fox, on the other hand, is very effective against these early ships. Well, it's also, if it hits, it's very effective against these early ships. Although I think I might have actually screwed up here a little bit. I've already had the part of the hole ripped open. Oh boy. So is that a Vanguard we just nuked? That's what I mean. That main cannon is very effective against those. Yep, so we've had the entire upper hole opened, which means we've now exposed the turret to fire, which is not an ideal situation to be in. And I think we just lost the rear turret. Yeah, we lost the front turret too. Yep. So the River Home, that main turret on top of it is actually dangerous enough that... Oh, and I forgot to turn my guy's repair thing off. So, that was unfortunate. Even relatively easy ships can kill you if you're not paying attention, but it's okay. Because the total cost of these 4 ships is at least enough that I can spawn probably a second Vulpo in, or I'm sorry, a second Fox in as well. But we'll just go 2-on-1. We should be fine now that the Rival Home, that was a relatively lucky shot that the Rival Home got in. And the fact that these littler ships had enough time to rip most of the wood off. And we've already killed a second. I believe that's the first Vanguard. I think that's a Vanguard retrofit over here. I think. I can't remember. And I don't even remember the third ship I spawned in. But yeah, the Fox, because of how maneuverable it is, it's not very fast. At 20 meters per second, it's not that fast, but it is very maneuverable. And because of that, ships that have relatively low rate of fire cannons have a really hard time hitting it, and ships with a higher rate of fire cannons have a really hard time getting enough firepower focused in on parts of it to kill it. And it's just gone. See what I mean? When that cannon hits, it is lethal against the early ships. And it has enough armor piercing and more than enough high explosive damage. It can stay effective against late game ships. Well, not late game, but mid game ships. While that AP gun is really good at just poking holes in the armor of late game ships and really good at just slowly ripping the block count of these early game ships apart. So these ships, again, even having to spawn in 2 ships, the number of it's just so silly. And you see the misses. This is the first time I've ever made a ship that uses agility rather than armor, and I like how it's ended. So the river home's basically dead at this point. So we basically won. Oh, see what I mean? It bounced inside the hole before detonating. That is great. So yeah, the river home was the only one that was even a remote threat, and it's the river home's what destroyed the first Fox. So if this fleet didn't have a river home, the first Fox could have taken all 4 of them easily. So this is what I mean when I say that the ship does not look very impressive until you compare it against what it's actually designed to fight, and then all of a sudden everything just dies. And the AI is dead, so we're going to wipe everything, and we're going to demonstrate one more thing. Rather than trying to demonstrate 50 more things. So we're only going to spawn a single Fox. Remember, this is a 90,000 resource point ship with a block count of just over 500. We're going to spawn in a paddle gun prototype, which is a paddle gun without the shields. It's a 2,300 block count ship that costs about 3, maybe even 4 times as much. I don't remember. I think it's like 26,000 or something. So it's actually not quite 3 times as expensive. And I don't know where it spawned. Oh, wow, it spawned us right beside it. This is not ideal. But basically, this ship is about a third the cost of that ship and less than a quarter its block count. So, just remember that as this fight progresses. Oh, poke. Luckily, those are very small, relatively not powerful AP rounds that this ship is shooting, and those are very weak HE missiles that it's shooting, so luckily... Oh no, those are frag missiles. That actually is not... Oh, this is not an ideal situation. I shouldn't have let it spawn us so close. Oh, my engines were shot off. Yep, my engines were all shot off. That's unfortunate. So... I think we may need a second... Yeah, I think the AI core was just destroyed. That's what I mean when I say I'm probably going to have to get the AI core set up. So we're going to start over entirely. It's not a perfect ship. It's not. And again, we're comparing it pretty high, pretty far from what it was designed to fight. It was not designed to fight paddle guns of any type. But now that we're far enough away that my agility should be able to be at least partially relevant, this should work out much better. Not that it's sharing a terribly large amount. Again, these are not ships that should be fighting each other. I mean, the size difference alone is enormous. The fact that we have that one main gun and that one little baby second gun, and I mean, that's it. And there's nothing we can do about the missiles. I mean, you can be as agile as you want. They're missiles. They kind of track, so... Oh, that was really unfortunate. It usually doesn't get shot too much. Yep, our secondary gun was just disabled. Oh, usually this ship doesn't get shot this much, and I'm pretty sure that took out the weapon. Yep. So that took out our weapon core. This is really annoying. Usually this ship does a lot better against paddle gun prototypes. I don't want to go 2-on-1. When I was testing these ships against each other earlier, the Fox won almost every fight. Relatively easily, too. Well, not easily. It took serious damage every time, but it also would consistently win. Oh, most of those shells went just under it. I think part of what it was that the main gun that the Fox uses was actually hitting. I don't think we've had it actually hit the paddle gun yet. Oh, not Fox's head. That round hit her right in the head. Oh, it shot her eye off. No. And bajoop. Yep, and that took most of the barrels of its gun off, which is going to reduce its accuracy even more, which is already not an accurate gun. Which, whew. Oh. Oh. Those are not misses by a significant margin, are they? Uh-oh, that one's not going to be a miss. Oh. Oh, it just barely misses, but it does miss most of the shots. When I said most of the shots, that's exactly what I meant. Most, not all. Unfortunately, the Fox just missed its shot too. And they take about 4 shots for every 1 shot of this main gun, which is unfortunate to say the least. The fact that the ammo, oh, and the ammo rack is just blown up. So I believe that's 0 for 3. We're gonna leave the ship sitting here. It has enough ammo left in that main turret to fire a few times at least. So we might not have lost this one. Oh, and it hit it just the worst possible angle, deflected off the side and then detonated behind the turret. Oh, and we just took another direct hit. The point, though, is that the paddle gun has also taken one hell of a beating. Its main turret has almost been destroyed. Its missiles haven't, but its missiles aren't doing enough damage on their own to really take the ship out. And there we go, right in the center of the turret. Exposed all of the inner workings of the turret. The next shot to go into the turret is going to blow its turret off. The downside is it does appear that we are sinking, and it does appear that we've again lost the weapon controller, which means our guns aren't working. So, but this would have been a win if it wasn't a one-on-one, and considering how much cheaper the Foxes are, it wouldn't normally be a one-on-one. So we're going to do this one more time. We're going to spread the Foxes out. We're going to spawn in 3 Foxes. And we're going to spawn them pretty far away from each other so they don't all get nuked. And then we're going to spawn in a full-on paddle gun. We would absolutely destroy a paddle gun prototype. I'm sure a 2-on-1. We might lose 1 Fox, but in a 2-on-1, we would absolutely destroy a paddle gun prototype. I have no idea what's going to happen here, though. I've not actually tried fighting against a real paddle gun. With that shield that it uses, and the fact that it uses much more lethal guns and much more lethal missiles, I don't think this is going to be a win for the Foxes, even 3-on-1. And because the paddle gun prototype, I believe, is a 29,000 resource point ship, this is actually an even amount of resources between these 4 ships. The fact that this ship does cost almost exactly as much as those 3, I believe. So this is actually a reasonably fair fight from a resource standpoint. Whether or not it ends up being a fair fight, or we end up losing horribly, has yet to be determined. The main guns that the paddle gun uses are pretty lethal, and the fact that it does have that shield means there's a pretty good chance that each shot I take isn't going to make it through the shield, and yet that one shot just detonated its ammo rack. And I believe that means we've won. Yeah, it's 2 damage to continue, and that shot missed entirely, but that is why I love the Foxes, because going up against very lethal, very dangerous ships, as long as it gets close enough to deliver 1 shot, it'll punch through the armor, then detonate inside, and you end up with shit like this, with the entire ship just being gutted, and the entire front just gone. So we did it. We took out a paddle gun. It had a relatively decent amount of luck. The fight can absolutely go the other way. The paddle gun is entirely capable. That Fox has basically been disabled. Even during this very short fight. Whoops. So during that very short fight, that Fox is basically fine. It's just scraped up some of the wood. The one in the middle has basically been disabled, and the one further back looks completely fine. The one that was closest to the paddle gun looks fine. So everything considered, I'm actually very happy with how this destroyer has turned out. It has enough firepower that, given a bit of luck, it is entire. Uh oh. We have Fox on Fox violence. Fox, why would you attack yourself? Why would you do this? Or are they snuggling? Let's say they're snuggling. There's. For some reason, this does seem incredibly like Fox to drown one of herself. Just having a cuddle. Anyway, I'm very happy with how this ship has turned out. It's it's so cute. It's so cute. It's one of the first ships I've ever made that, in my opinion, actually looks good compared to everything else. Right? Compared to the Vulpo, that's just a lump of steel. This ship actually has some personality. Look at it. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, I'm so happy. Look at it. Look at it. It's so goofy. Oh my god. So we've done it. We have our first ship. It's pretty much finalized. There might be some small tweaks, but nothing is going to be noteworthy. And so I'm going to touch up the Vulpo. I'm going to build a fighter and name it something. Whoops. And then I'm going to start up a campaign game. So expect the next video to be on whatever the fighter ends up being. And then after that, then we're going to start a campaign. So I'll see you guys then. Have fun. And remember, Blue-Eyed Fox is the best. Because finish. It's just a fact.